and welcome back. In the last lesson, I asked you to design a wage calculator that would ask for employee names, their wage per hour, and the total number of hours they've worked. And then at the end, it would ask you to give the name of the employee that you want to calculate the total money earned for. So let's go over this again. Let's say my name's Daniel, let's say 14. Let's say I've worked 20 hours. Let's say John, let's say he has earned $40 an hour, and he has worked about 10 hours this week. Then for the last one, let's go with Tom. Let's say he earns $12 an hour, and then the amount of hours he has worked, let's say 25. So now it's going to ask me for the name of the employee. Let's go with Tom this time. Last time we went with John. For Tom, he has earned $300, which makes sense because 12 by 25 is 300. Now, I didn't show you what happens if I given a wrong name, so let's try that too. Let's say Daniel again. 14 hours worked, 23. Let's go with Tom. 12, 67 hours. Let's say I've already had, okay. John again. Let's say $90 an hour, and hours worked 2. This time around, let's just put in something that doesn't exist. So let's just say Lisa. She doesn't work. She's not part of the employee record. So it says record not found, and the program ends. So let me show you how I did mine. Let me change this to side by side. So first of all, I have a list, an empty list called employees. That's where I'm going to be storing all the tuples with the employees and their details. Then I print out employee 1. I ask for all the details, and then I go ahead and turn it into a tuple. First of all, I say employee record. I save the name, the wage, and the hours into it. Then I append that employee record to the employees list. Once I have that, and then I just output what the employees list is currently holding. I do the same exact thing for the second one. Ask details, turn it into a tuple, add the tuple to the list, and then print the list. Number 3, the same exact thing. Now, for the last one, I ask for the name of the employee. I compare the name with the first item of each tuple in the list. This is for the first tuple, this is for the second tuple, this is for the third tuple, and since it's always the first item in the tuple, this is always 0. I compare the names with the first item in the tuple, and whichever one it is, I use their wage per hour and their hours worked, multiply it, and get the amount they earned. And if it wasn't found, I just put an else statement with print now record. So that's how I did mine. Your code should look similar. My solution will be in the description. So that's it for now. Let's move on to the lesson. In today's lesson, we will be looking at loops and iterables. So an iterable is anything that holds multiple values. Strings are iterables since they hold multiple characters. Lists and tuples are definitely iterables as well. Since lists and strings can be of different sizes, we can assume that iterables can be of different sizes. Some iterables like string can only hold one type of value, that is single characters that are also string, while others like lists and tuples can hold different types of values in the same list or tuple. We will look at 2 ways to iterate over an iterable. We can either iterate by value or by index. We can use both ways of iteration on string, lists, and tuples. And how do we iterate over iterables? We do it using loops. First, we will look at a loop that is more commonly used to iterate over iterables. That is the for loop. The for loop is mostly used when we have a general idea of how many times the loop will iterate. However, that doesn't mean that you cannot use a for loop when you don't know the number of iterations that will take place, and certainly not in Python, as you will see when you learn about generator functions. For now though, let's look at the syntax that the for loop uses. If we want to iterate over the values in the iterable, we write for, followed by variable name, followed by in, and then the iterable. This iterates over the values one by one during each iteration of the loop. The value that is currently being iterated over is assigned to the variable defined with the for loop. Just like conditional blocks, we have loop blocks that work exactly the same way as the conditional blocks. The colon at the end of the for statement indicates the start of the loop block. All the statements in the loop block have the same level of indentation. If we want to iterate using indexes, we use the range function. We write for, followed by the variable name, followed by in, and then the range function. Inside the parentheses of the range function, we write the number of values of the iterable. We can either write the integer value if we know it, or we can use the len function to get the number of values in the iterable. The index is held by the variable in this case. We can then simply access all the values in an iterable using the variable as an index. The loop block still works the same way. Now, let's have a look at how different these two ways of iterating look. Let's say we have a list with 3 integers named myList. If we want to print the values in the list, we can use the first method of iterating over the list by values. We write for x in myList, where x is just a variable and could be named anything else. We write a colon to indicate the start of the loop block. We then write the print function inside the loop block. Since x is holding each value in the list one at a time, we write x inside the parentheses of the print function. This would print all the values in my list. The second way of iterating is using indexes. We have the same list here. We can start the for loop with the variable x to hold the indexes one at a time. We then use the range function. The range function gives us a list of numbers to go over. It starts at 0 and ends at 1, less than the value specified in the parentheses. So len of my list is 3, since it has 3 values, but the last index is 2, since the first value is index 0. So, a range gives us a list of numbers from 0 to 2. We can then access each value inside my list as we go through the list of numbers. I know this seems a little daunting, but it will make more sense when we look at the code. Let's look at another type of loop before we move on to coding. The while loop is much simpler than the for loop. It keeps looping until the condition that is assigned to it is false. However, it doesn't even start looping if the condition is never true. The while loop is mostly used when we do not have a general idea of how many times the loop will iterate. The syntax of the while loop is very simple. We write while, followed by the condition that needs to be satisfied for it to run, and then the colon. After the colon, we write the block of code that we want it to loop over. So, if we want to write numbers from 0 to 9, we first assign 0 to a variable, x in this case. We can then write while x is less than 10, keep repeating this block of code. The code we want to repeat is to print x and add 1 to x. This will keep doing this until eventually x hits 10, and then the while loop stops and moves to the next statement. We can also use the while loop to iterate over an iterable. We usually use it when we don't know the exact amount of times the loop will iterate. We can iterate over an iterable using indexes. We write a variable again, x in this case, and assign it to 0. We can then write while, followed by the condition to check if x is less than the length of the iterable. We can then start looping and printing values in the iterable. We increase x by 1 at a time. Once x hits the length of the variable, it stops the while loop from running the block of code. This method with the while loop should also print all the values in the list. Now, let's try to code some of the loops that we learned today in our code. So, in this lesson, we learned about iterables and loops. Let's see how we can use some of them. Let's say we have a list called x, 2, and 3. If we want to iterate over the values, we learned that we use a for loop. So let's say for each in x, print x. So no, print each, because each is what the value will be assigned to as it iterates over it. So let's see, 1, 2, and 3. This could go on like say 6, 7, 8. I know I skipped 4 or 5, but I wanted to. So 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8. We can do the same thing with strings, for example, because we know strings are iterables too, right? So let's say hello world, and let's say for each in y, print each. And now we have hello space world exclamation mark. So any iterable, you can use any iterable with for and each in iterable here, and then you can print each of the values. This is one way of iterating over an iterable. Let's see how we can use indexes to do it too. So we would use a range function, type in the len, which is going to be x, for example, and then we can do print x, and then for the index, we can just say each at a time because it's going to start at 0 and it's going to end 1 before the length. Let's see what it does. Does the exact same thing as if we had iterated over the values themselves. If we remove x, just use each, it's just going to go from 0 to the length. So it's going to go from 0 all the way to 5. There are 6 things, so it's going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then we can also use a while loop, right? Let's have a look at that now. So we assign, let's just call the variable index to 0, and while index is less than, say, x, so this is going to be 6, right? This is going to be 6, while it is less than that. Oh, I forgot the colon, that's why I didn't add the indentation for me. While index is less than x, just print x index, and every time we gotta increase index by 1. That's how you do that. So let's do this. So the same thing again, 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8. It just uses the index, increases index 1 by 1, and as soon as the index hits 6, it stops. It doesn't run anything else. We can, so this one is what adds to every time we run the loop. If we remove this, let's do this. Instead of looking at the index, we're just gonna say index and print index. But keep in mind, we're not increasing the index at all. So index will stay 0 all the time, and then it's just gonna keep printing. And let's see what happens. So look at that. This is what's called an infinite loop. There is no condition that would stop it, so it's gonna keep looping over again and again and again. So let's stop it through this. Let's add the condition 1. So now it's just going to run 10 times from 0 till 9. Now, what if the condition is never true? Say it's 10, because 10 is not less than 10. So will it run at all? No, it doesn't run at all then. That's the difference between the for loop and a while loop. The for loop is used when you know the amount of times it should iterate over, whereas the while loop, you just go like, okay, just keep running as long as until the condition is met. If the condition is met, just loop again, but as soon as it doesn't meet the condition anymore, then stop. Then let's have a look at, let's try making a program that uses this. So let's make a program called guess my number, right? We're gonna have the codes. Let's say we want to save 7. Then we can say while, let's ask for the input first, or let's have another variable called guess. We can assign that to 0. By default, it's going to be 0. Okay, then we're going to say while number is not equal to guess, print guess is equal to int input, let's say guess my number between 1 and 10. So okay, and then it's going to compare if guess is equal to number, print you guessed correctly, else print you guessed wrong, try again. Right? So the loop is going to keep going until I guess the number. That's the whole point of using a while loop. I don't know how many tries it's going to take the user to guess the number, but no matter how many tries it takes, whenever the user gets the number correct, it's going to stop running. So let's say guess number between 1 and 10. Let's say I said 3. So you guessed wrong, try again. 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 9, nothing. But the second I guess 7, which is what our number is right here, it's going to say you guessed correctly and the program is going to end. That's the difference between the for loop and the while loop. That's it for the coding lesson. Let's look at the problem now. Before we look at the problem for this lesson, there's one more thing I want to go over first. So let's say I have a list. I'm going to call it my list. And I have 1, 2, 3, right? Comma, 4, 5, 6, comma, 6, 7, 8. And these 3 lists are going to be items inside of another list, right? Oh, let me just put this 7, 8, and 9, right? So let's see what happens. If I want to print out for I in list, should be my list, print I. So let's see what happens, and there you go. It prints out each of the items that are 1, 2, and 3. Instead of this, I'm going to go in one deeper. I'm going to say for J in I, print J. Now each I is holding a list at a time. Let me just keep that print in here as well, just so I can see what it is iterating over at that point. So it's going to print this, and then it's going to go over each and every one of these, right? It's going to go over 1, 2, and 3. Then it's going to look at the item 4, 5, 6, and it's going to go over 4, 5, 6, and then 7, 8, 9, and then it's going to keep doing that. Now, this is where the difference between why you want to access a value using indexes or the values themselves. If I want to change the value right here, let's say I want to say J, I want to set J to something else. Say I want to change 5 to a 10, right? I just want to change the number 5 to a 10. So I can say this, if J, like this is what you would think you would need to do, right? J is equal to 10. Then I'm going to print and then if it's changing it, I'm going to say tell me that you're changing J, okay? Okay, and then it's going to print my list again, and we're just going to copy it so I can see it before it gets printed, okay? So this is my list for the first time. Then I print everything. Then it says changing J, as it should, because J is 5 now, so it should be changing it. But look what happens at the list here. 5 is still there. There's no 10 here. So what happened? So when you're iterating over a list, what it does is it looks at each item and then assigns a copy of that item to I. The I itself doesn't go to the item. It's a copy of I that the I is assigned to. So this works fine if you're printing them out, if you just want to view what's in the list. But if you're making changes to the list, then it's not going to work. What you need to do then is use indexes. So this is where indexes would come in. So I would change this to range of my list, and then I'm going to say print I. So this turns into my list I, and then here it's going to be len of, obviously needs to go inside the range function too, range of this item right here, because remember this item is the list itself. So I'm going to copy it and paste it here. Okay, so now I'm going over the range, which is supposed to, in this case, this item would just give back 3 because that's the number of items in this list. Then this is going to go over, each list is going to be printed here, and then it's going to go over each list using the number of items in each list. Once that's here, we again have to use my list, and this is where we'll have to use double notation. So we're going to have to put I for the first one and J for the second one. And if I print out this now, it's going to say, look, it's the exact same thing as it was before. So it's going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But this time around, I know what I and J are. If I change my list, I and J to 10. wait, I wanted to change it only for if j is 5. If this thing right here is equal to 5, then change whatever is being held here to 10. Let's see what happens. I forgot the column. Okay, so look at the list. Now the list has the number 10, right? Here the list was 5, here it is 10 now. So this is why sometimes using indexes to iterate over an item is a lot more useful than just using, the values themselves. The values themselves are fine if you just want to print them, but if you're going to access them and change them, then it's a good idea to use indexes to access it. Okay, so that's it for this coding lesson. Let's look at the problem now. So the problem for this lesson, we're going to design tic-tac-toe. This is a popular game. Most of you should know how to play this, but I'll let you know anyways. The first step is the player 1 marks a spot. So let's say he chooses 2. Enter. Now the spot with the number 2 is now marked with X. Player 2 chooses a spot. Let's say he chooses 4. And now it's marked with an O at number 4. The objective of the game is to get your character in either one row like this, or one column like X, 5, and 8, or get it diagonally, so 1, 5, 9 or 3, 5, 7. So the way you can win this game in like multiple ways. Either you can get this whole row to be your character, this whole row, or this column, this column, this column, or the two diagonally. Those are the things that you will be checking to know whether the game has ended or not. Then one more thing, if I give a number that's not valid, so for example 2 has already been marked, and if I give it 2 again, no, I was supposed to give it 2. Okay, so let's just give it 1 now, and it's not going to continue. It's going to say, no, player 2, you please choose the location. It's not going to continue to player 1 because it knows that 1 has already been marked. So you need to implement that into your program as well. Then let's see what happens when I win the game. Let's see, player 2 is O. Let's see, player 2 chooses 7. Now player 1 can choose 3 and win the game, right? Because he will have X in all 3 in the top row. So player 1 wins. That's what happens. Now I used a while loop because you don't know how many marks will be placed before someone gets a row or a column, or someone might not even get one. So you have to keep that into account as well. You can use a while loop for that. And then you need to also know how to print these things. What I'm doing is I'm storing each row as a list inside another list which has the whole board. So the whole list one list has 3 lists inside of it, and each small list has 3 items in it for each row. Then I just mark each. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 spots marked in those lists, and then as the locations are told to me, I just mark each spot respectively depending on the player. So see if you can figure this one out. You will also have to print the board every time. Every time someone marks a spot, you will have to print the board. So take this step by step, this whole program. Print the board first, see if you can figure that out, get the lists to work, and then the second thing is to get the location to work. If the user gives you a spot, make sure to mark that particular spot. And then finally, you need to check every time someone marks a spot, you need to check whether they win the game or not. So this will take some time. Take it step by step, work it out, and I will show you the solution to this problem, or how I solved it, in the next lesson, and I'll see you then.